Hey Sportlighters, welcome to another spectacular special guest Saturday. Today, Meg and Dr. G sit down with a coach who can do it all. Alison Foley, former head women's soccer coach at Boston College and CEO of Foley Athletic Advising, reveals her secrets to her successful career and how she helped shatter ceilings to set a new bar for women in coaching. This is Sport Knowledge.
Hey, Meg and Dr. G here for Sportlight, and with us today is one of my absolute favorite coaches, Alison Foley, who spent 22 years as the head women's coach at Boston College and built an incredible team not only of great soccer players, but of great women as well. As the winningest coach in the program's history, Coach Foley led her team to 15 NCAA Division I tournament appearances, including 8 Sweet 16s, 8 Elite 8s, easy for me to say, and hit the Final Four in 2010 before retiring in 2018. And as if that's not enough, Alison is an adjunct lecturer at Regis College in their fitness and health science department, a scout for U.S. soccer, as well as CEO of Foley Athletic Advertising. Nope. Not done yet. Alison has co-authored 2 of the leading books on girls soccer, How to Coach Girls, which was released in 2018, and this year, The Elusive Full Ride Scholarship and Insider's Guide. Okay, well, Alison, obviously you've redefined overachiever. Very impressive. Welcome to Sportlight.
Thank you, Meg. It's good to see you, and G, great to see you as well.
Thanks for coming. It's nice to meet you and sharing your time with us.
Thank you.
So we're gonna start obviously at the beginning. My guess is you love soccer.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
So I assumed you played as a kid, and give us a little glimpse into Alison as a young athlete.
Yeah. So as a young athlete, soccer was my favorite sport, and played a little basketball as well. But back then, U.S. soccer, we had Olympic development programs, and you'd make your state team and your regional team, and then go to national camp. So that was sort of what I did every summer, since probably about 12 years old, and through college. So love it. Still do. Still play a little bit once in a while.
You always that's all you ever wanted to do? Was be in soccer?
Well, not professional. Like, I didn't think as a career. I always loved to play, but I never thought, I didn't even think it was a job, like a real job, like college coach. Like, it's not a job, right? So it wasn't to the head coach that had recruited me to Keene State. He had left right before I went to Keene, but we remained very friendly. And he went down to be the head coach at James Madison University. And my senior year at Keene, I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do. My undergraduate degrees in psychology. I was looking into some counseling programs, masters, but I wasn't 100% sure. And then he called me, and I think it was April, and he's like, "Well, what are you doing now?" I have no idea. And he said, "I'm looking for a graduate assistant. I think you'd be a great fit down here." So I went down there, on an interview, and looked around and met with people in the kinesiology department. I actually changed. I started in the counseling program there, and then I changed to kinesiology. And so met people in both, because I wasn't positive what I was going to do. And then 2 years after I got my master's, the job became full-time, and he saved me again, because I didn't know what I was doing again.
You graduated and said, "Now what?"
Yeah, exactly. Who's saving me now?
Can you elaborate on that one? I'm very interested, right, with your years of coaching and women's soccer too, and being a head coach as long as you are is at the Division I level is a tremendous accomplishment in itself to have that longevity. But even back then too, this is 20 plus years ago. So what's going on at the time that coach identifies you as a promising coach or somebody that he wants to have on staff?
Yeah, I think at the beginning, as a grad assistant, sort of probably some of the qualities, you just need somebody really like dedicated and hardworking, and I think that's probably, what I think I'd be loyal to him. I'd work hard for him. Even though, he left for a different job, we stayed in contact through, my career, my college career. And I think in any job, and certainly in coaching, you want somebody to be committed and loyal. And, I think that was just the way our relationship had unfolded.
Yeah. It's an interesting pipeline too, because this is one of the things that I study too, and right in sport coaching is gender. And so this is a male coach recruiting a, woman to be a graduate assistant with them too. So even back then, there weren't a lot of women coaches at that level.
You're right, Brian. There weren't, and it's getting better. I still think, I'd love to, I'm a big advocate for women. When I see leadership or some qualities in them, I'm like, you got to do this. You can do this as a career. And I really try to encourage women to do that. I mean, I think the longevity of the sport for women, to coach in athletics is difficult to raise a family. I think the average Division I female coach is like 7.8 years is the average, where I think it's, for guys, 17 plus years, in the profession, not necessarily at one institution, but in the profession. And, it does take some work. It does take some work balancing, children and Division I recruiting and coaching. It's year round. It's around the clock. It's, busy. So, but I think now with the expansion of staffs and they're adding an extra assistant on staff, hopefully, we'll get to see more women, involved in coaching longer.
Do you have any suggestions or hints for women coaches, things that you were able to do with your, do you have one or two kids? I can't remember.
I have one, Sydney. Yeah. What I will say is I was in a really fortunate situation where we were able to add, I knew I was going to be gone constantly. So we added an in-law apartment to the house. So I had a nanny, in my house all the time, which was really, she traveled with us. So that I was really fortunate. We had family around as well. So, we could have certain people come in on a Monday to relieve the nanny. And so we just had a really good network. And and so I was a little bit lucky in my childcare scenario, but you can do it. People can totally do it. And I remember, so there was nobody that had at that time, nobody had a child at BC. There was men did. There was dads, but there weren't any moms.
Yeah.
And I remember going into my athletic director when I was pregnant. And I think this is sort of the problem. And I was a part of it. I was part of it too. I was like, oh my God, I got to tell my AD. First of all, in my mind, I was like, I'm going to wait until I get in the final 16 before I get pregnant. Just so I'm like established a little bit. So I got that done. And then I remember going in to tell my AD I was pregnant and just to make sure he knew I could do this. And that I wasn't going to take a month maternity leave. I'd take a week. I'd get back on my feet. It was in January. Sydney was born in January by design. So, so
it's pretty impressive all in itself. Just,
like females have to think about, right?
Yeah.
And then I went into my athletic director, Gene DiFilippo, and I have to say, he was great. He's like, stop. Do you know how happy I am for you?
Oh, isn't that great?
You know how great this is going to be for all the female athletes to see you be a mom? And he's like, I want you to bring her around. I mean, it couldn't have gone any better. I was really lucky. So, but I think that's the problem. There's this stigma that women put on themselves that if I start raising a family, people are going to think I'm distracted or I'm not going to be as good at my job anymore. And it's just not true. It's just not true. I think I became a better coach after I was a mom. And I think that happens to a lot of people, and you find a way to balance. You just find a way to make it all come together. So, I just think it's a great job. It's a great job. It's great to have your children around college students. It's really good for the college students to see you as a mom. So I think it's a really good connection all around.
Yeah. In the literature and one of the things you kind of touch upon though, right? Like, women, it's not like they put that burden on themselves out of nowhere. It's from years, centuries of being discriminated and not having full access and rights and careers. So, and one of the things that we see too, right, is that different scenarios, different contexts. So your AD and your experience, that we're sounding very supportive too.
Very supportive.
So I guess, so in order to enlarge the discussion to other coaches and administrators, what was going on in addition to his encouragement? What do you think it would take to have a supportive, family-friendly work environment to help more women and men balance that role in being a sport parent, coach at the high level?
Yeah, I think really encouraging, and this, I think this can go in a lot of different occupations. It's okay to travel with your family, as long as that your child has, you bring a caregiver with you, whether it be a relative or a nanny or whoever it might be. We were allowed to bring our manager on some trips because she was able to watch Sydney. And so that was sort of our, part of what we do. And I think that you just have to ask those questions to your athletic director. I really do think, not everybody, some might not agree, but I think the majority of people do want to support you and do want to have a network around you. The field hockey coach had a daughter. She came in later, but like when Sydney was 4 years old, Ainsley Lamb. So then it was another mom, on staff. And it was really helpful to them just bounce and balance some things off of her and have somebody else in the same situation. But again, I would just really say that communicate with your AD. You may have to realign some of your job descriptions and responsibilities with your staff. And maybe if you felt like you needed to do the majority of the recruiting, out on the field or, in the ice rink or wherever, if you were the one on site, maybe you do some more of the recruiting behind the scenes and you allow your assistants, an opportunity to be that recruiting coordinator, because now they're also gaining that experience of being, a primary contact and out on the field. So shifting responsibilities on your staff, it's good. It also adds personal growth and for your members of your staff.
You sounded kind of surprised at the response. I think BC is kind of special in that way, but or was back then. But what do you know of any fellow colleagues that had trouble with their administration with anything, pregnancy or anything else, as being a woman coach?
I don't. I did have one particular friend whose athletic director just said, we just don't allow family, whether it's your significant other, your mom, your children. We just don't allow family to travel. This is a business trip, and that's the way we want it to be represented. So
was it a budget thing or a philosophy thing?
No, it was a philosophy thing. No, it was a philosophy thing. And but majority of my friends, my female friends that were in college coaching were very well supported.
That's great.
Yeah. So that's what young women that are considering this need to know, that the majority are very supportive.
How about, let's touch again, we always sometimes approach this as a negative sort of thing, or like the consequences. What about the positive, right? The AD Jerry's talking about, oh, this is going to be so great for the women athletes to see. What were some of the other ways that, having a child or being pregnant and having a family around the athletes, and for yourself then as a parent, enhanced your coaching and enhanced the environment?
Yeah. I think sometimes coaches, they're the coach, they're the boss, right? And they're in charge, they're leading, maybe she has a sensitive side, maybe she doesn't, but they see you kiss your baby and nurture your baby and like take care of your baby. I think that adds an extra level of approachability. And, my coach is real. My coach, and I think I had a pretty good relationship prior to being pregnant with that particular team. I think it even got tighter. And for me too, to watch them with my child, was amazing. So I think that's a bonus for kids to see that, I think it was a bonus for them to see the mom in me. And I think that goes for a lot of coaches when players can see that leader, sort of that, dominant figure, a little bit softer and nurturing, they can be seen as a little bit more approachable and enhance the relationship.
Yeah, well, we see that. I mean, in the literature too, that right, the leadership was always a masculine, very dominating, autocratic, sort of thing. Even the great man personality theories of 75 years ago. But obviously, that's changed as gender roles and more inclusive environments has changed too. Even for male coaches, right? And I was coaching and brought my daughter in a baby jumper. That was a totally different thing for people to see, and
Absolutely.
so I'm curious, and yeah, for you, how did then being a sport parent maybe change your coaching or how you thought about, the girls and the young people that you're working with, right? You have a child, and it's transformational. You have a child of your own now, and you're like, wow, what revelations, what new insights, do you think happened in your life at that point?
I think I realized like, okay, this is going to be a balancing act, but I think it's going to teach the kids that you can do a lot of things too. And I did really believe after the conversation with my AD that this was being a really good role model in whatever profession they were going to choose. It didn't necessarily have to be coaching, but that, they're going to graduate from this great school, Boston College, and get a really good degree. Raising a family and being a mom doesn't have to stop you in your profession. You can do this simultaneously, and you can do it really well simultaneously. So I think that was sort of a revelation or an opportunity for me to be able to role model that for the kids.
Did it change the way you coached at all? Did you see the girls a little differently?
You recognize you're dealing with somebody's child, and you do ask yourself, like, okay, I want to choose the right tone. I want to really think about this conversation because somebody's going to talk to Sid like this one day. And and absolutely that ran through my head after having Sydney, on the way I would communicate in conversations, content, tone, the whole bit.
I wonder, in your case then, as an athlete yourself, what the effect your parents had on you and how their tone was. It's always a weird transition when you go from not being a parent to being a parent.
Yeah.
And then, it's hard to describe to people. And then you have a child and you're like, wow, this is really transformational. But do you want to talk about how your parents influenced your career development and your values then as an athlete and as a person?
Yeah. My parents were super supportive. And, I had mentioned, that like the ODP and all of that, like everything I have 3 other siblings, and it was sort of like, oh, everything's going to run around Allison's soccer schedule. Here we go. And national camp used to be out in Franklin Marshall, which is in Pennsylvania, and right outside of Hershey, Pennsylvania. And every summer I'd be there. So my family would always go to Hershey Park on summer vacation because I had to be at Franklin Marshall down the road. And I was so sick of the chocolate factory every single time. So it was sort of a full family, support, and I can remember, like, if I had like a big game or something, they're like, well, Allison can cut down on her chores, but why don't you guys pick it up a little bit? So my siblings were, I have a lot to be thankful. Like, and I kind of was just like, well, yeah, that's the way it's going to go. They were really supportive. My whole family was. My dad coached me a lot in both soccer and basketball, youth sport. So that, that was always really important to me to do well for him. And whether it was up at Keene State or at BC, I can probably count on one hand all my career, how many games he lost. I mean, he was, and my mom too, but my mother too. But it was like my dad's life revolved around BC soccer, like he put his vacation time around weekends we were wet, so I was really fortunate, with my full family support of my soccer career, young and post. I'm also old, kind of old. Yeah.
That's hardcore. Your dad was hardcore. That's a hardcore. If you're scheduling your vacations around sports schedules, you're pretty hardcore with it.
I know.
I can't remember the last time I had Thanksgiving not at an IHOP or
exactly.
Dairy Queen.
Exactly.
I wanted to ask, what are some of the things that you have done, like you recognize when you're coaching your daughter, that kind of remind you of both positive and negative of things that your father you experienced with your father coaching you?
Yeah, it's funny. I think Sydney was 7 or 8 when I first coached her, and I remember I think this is the first time I'm admitting this is right now. I remember like when my dad would compliment one of my friends or one of them, I used to kind of get jealous, and I used to like make sure whatever it was, I did a little bit better. And
A little competitive. Okay.
yeah, because I was like, I want my dad to think I'm the best on the team.
Of course.
And I saw that in Sydney as well. So, and that emotion of how that felt to me just kind of came right through me again. And I was like, okay, I got to remember, like, I've got to, balance this off. And because sometimes coaches don't want to compliment their own kid because it sounds like they're favoring them, or, you have to always be, cautious of that. And, but I remember how that felt. And I remember, so I just said, okay, Sid's like everybody else. If she does something well, I'm going to compliment her, no more or no less than her teammates. So that was one of the, I guess that was one of the things that helped me remember kind of how I felt.
Well, there's a lot of coach parents that coach their own child then are like extra hard on them sometimes.
Yeah.
And you hear it's easier to discipline your own child than somebody else's child sort of narrative of today's age, especially.
I have seen that. I will say my dad wasn't like that to me. And I hope I wasn't like that to Sydney.
Mm-hmm. We're going to have her on next too.
Yeah, right. I was just going to say that.
We're going to have a totally different story. But, and I also, one thing that I wouldn't do that my dad would talk about the game on the car ride, that, that he'd go on, we'd have big no. But once we were in the car, I said, Sid, where do you want to go for ice cream? What are we doing next here? I really try to put that mom hat on as quickly as I could, because I did want to distinguish that, there are two different roles that I'm going to play. I'm going to be your coach. Of course, I'm your mom still, but that's what goes on for that hour and a half training session game.
How about for you as a child athlete around your dad? Like, you were aware of it and then didn't kind of reinforce or balance some of those things, but what did you do to cope at the time too, to kind of block out that maybe, too much pressure that can result in some, negative outcomes?
Yeah. It's interesting, G. I guess I didn't really know any better. I was like, okay, I kind of don't want to talk about this anymore, but I thought this must go on with everybody's parents that coach them. They just might bring it home. So I guess
it's normal. Yeah.
I just thought it was normal. Yeah.
Yep. And you went into, now that I'll make the connection, right? You went into psychology and perhaps then counseling psychology as well. And that's often a very common thing too, is people are trying to make sense of their lives or, respond to something that they've experienced thus far in their lives.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
That's my psychoanalysis 101 is free today.
Yeah. Thanks, G. That's so helpful. All right. Well, I want to talk a little bit about coaching. Let's talk about BC and how this incredible program that you built, and just, I remember such a warm feeling coming from the whole staff when the kids come to even the camps and that sort of thing. What was kind of your coaching philosophy that helped build that incredible program?
Thank you, thank you for recognizing that, Meg, because I think that's the groundwork of what we wanted to do. We wanted to be a family. I was really fortunate with great assistant coaches. We talked about Mike Levine. I see him now, even when I've moved far away from him, he's in my house more than anybody else. That
is not surprising.
And I love him to death. We care about each other as a staff. We care about we work hard, we disagree, we watch video. I don't see it sometimes the same way, my assistants, but we agree to disagree because we're working for the common cause and we care about each other. And we want all everybody in the program successful. We try to emulate that same feeling and that same connection with our players, that we're there for them. We want to support them. We're going to push them. And there are going to be times when we have to make decisions that might not be what they want. However, we're going to stick by their side. We're going to help them through it if they want that help. And we're going to work, we're going to all work together, when things aren't great, to make sure we get them better. That's sort of always been, the common thread of how our program has operated. I think from a specific soccer point, I think the best thing that our program, other than having the kids know that we were really there for them, was we developed our players. I think when we were in the ACC, we probably didn't get a player like UNC, or maybe a couple once in a while, or Duke or Virginia, but we loved working individually, small groups with our players, because that's when they really get better. And that's also a time that you connect when you're working, out of season in a smaller group or with them individually, because, they have your undivided attention. So I think that was another, really big foundation building block was, making smaller group connections and training individually with our kids.
What do you think was one of the key things in creating that kind of culture?
I think with our players, everyone has expectations and standards. Everyone has certain goals and leadership skills, all this. We always talked about being kind, be kind. Everyone on this team's equal. It was really important if somebody was, 30 on our roster, that we made them feel like they were number one to us and that they were important and they mattered. And we really asked all the players to buy into that, be kind to each other in the program, be kind to your fans. Everyone would always say, thank you to the bus driver when we got, everyone had to acknowledge the bus driver when we got on that bus, when we got off that bus, the wait staff when we were in restaurants, it's just to be, and Michael, I bring him up again. One thing he'd say, he goes, the worst thing in the world, bad manners. Worst thing in the world, bad manners. And it's what our staff, it's really good to be kind and well-mannered. And we hope as a staff that we would portray and practice what we preach. I think I would pick members on our staff before they're a really good soccer person to be a really good person. And I think we select our roster in a similar way.
And with all the numbers that everyone's going with, you're connected all the time to all these little gadgets that, give you statistics one way or another. And I think a lot of coaches may rely on those too much or get a little lazy. Do I say that?
Yeah, no. I think to a certain point, we all get affected by stats and numbers and, rankings, national rankings, whether it be their team, individually, by their position. But the best thing about recruiting is when you find that diamond in the rough, right? That nobody really knows about, or that wasn't, in Soccer America or Top Drawer Soccer or ranked really high. And you usually find them, at maybe one of your ID clinics or something like that, like a Charlie, right? I wouldn't have found Charlie if Charlie didn't come out, so, and then all of a sudden,
Nice of you to say.
Yeah. So those are the really, really great things when that happens.
So you two are going to have to tell everybody listening now, who is Charlie and how this hit a little bit more of the history here.
Okay. I'm going to let Meg get into that.
Quickly, Meg.
I think the best day of Charlie's life, I think we went out. I can't remember a summer we weren't in Boston, which are not always pleasant, by the way.
Nice.
It's so hot, but and none of the places have air conditioning. It's lovely. No, but she went out there for her first one. I think when she was about 12, and she
was young. Yeah.
Yeah, and she loved it. And the only reason we started there was because I went to BC. I'm like, okay, well, let's just go see that one and see see if you like it. And she loved it. I was like, okay, well, you're going to have to go back in the winter then, because it's not always like this.
Exactly.
We went back, I think, in January or something like that. She loved it. So, but I think the happiest day, this explains everything. The happiest day of her life is she's headed in, all nervous, little tiny Charlie. She's all nervous to go to this ID camp. And Allison is cutting and running before all the parents get to her, before the beginning of the camp. And you come out of the bubble and Charlie's there. We're just walking by and you're like, Charlie! And you give her a hug and she's like, I think her feet actually rose off the ground. I mean, it was the sweetest thing on earth. And from that moment on, she was just set. And I just remember how amazing it was. She went to other camps and she looked at other schools and everything, but there was a real connection to the girls and the staff. I mean, she could pick up on it right away. She couldn't vocalize it very well, but it stands out. There's no question. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it seems to be exemplifying. I'm trying to, like, I wasn't there, obviously. Nobody else side was there, but what a powerfully emotional, uplifting, positive thing, kind of displaying that kindness, but making a big difference in the life of a 12-year-old to make them feel really good at that time.
Let's talk about recruiting a little bit. I'm curious about how you were able to pick such incredible kids, and they weren't always, the top of the top of the top, which you could have done. Coming from, especially when you guys were in the ACC, you could have really gone by the numbers. And what made you decide to go in other directions?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, Meg, is we knew that we were going to be around these kids a long time. It's not like a club soccer team. If you're going to go coach a club soccer team, or even to the national team to some point, get the best players, because once you go home, they go back to their parents after the game, right? We knew we had to get the right people in our family. We knew we had to have players that we could trust on and off the field. We knew we had to have certainly we just had the biggest compliment I think Anson ever gave us was, hey, going up to Boston and playing those grinders, like they're the hardest, they're mudders and grinders, and they're the hardest team to play against. And so we looked for those qualities in a person. We looked for somebody, we'd look to see on the field when a team was down, how did players deal with that adversity? Like, who was the player that was trying to get their team up, or when, in the last couple minutes, if they were tied, who was just pushing and pushing. So we really try to look for that grit on the field. And then we were, phone calls and meetings, and, now a lot of it's being done on Zooms. We really took our time getting to know players and families. That was important to us. And it was important for me to involve all of my staff in the recruiting process, because I value their opinion, and I wanted to make sure, we were always on the same page. So that's, that's sort of what we wanted in sort of a quality and the qualities of our players.
So, Coach, when I hear you articulate that, it's very refined, right? And there's and I'm thinking of some of the literature that, right, you're talking about your philosophy and your values and how you want to run your program. How did that get solidified? What are some of the learning experiences that you had along the way to go, this is how we're going to do things, and not kind of fall into, or maybe you did too, maybe you fell into some traps, quick fixes, or try to cut corners or recruit people that didn't fit. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had my mistakes. I've taken a couple of transfers that didn't work out, or I got somebody, too early, and I didn't take my time getting to know them as well, or understanding their background. And so I definitely had a few setbacks, through early, especially because I was 26 when I started at BC. So that was young. So I early on definitely had that, like, oh my goodness, this kid at that time, UConn was really good, right? And I'm like, we're in a recruiting battle with UConn. Like, I just got to jump on this and offer her more money. So I did have, those mistakes where and it wouldn't have necessarily been the, character flaw in the recruit, maybe just didn't, play and just be the person that was what we were trying to develop. And I think in terms of the environment, I think we're all products of what we were brought up in. I don't think that I was ever the most talented soccer player. I worked really hard. I knew what I could control. I could control being the fittest kid on the team, the hardest working kid, somebody that didn't give up. So, I think if that's kind of who you are and that's kind of how you played, you recruit, I think similar to your own playing style. And in terms of the environment, one of the whole reasons I went to Keene State was because of my high school soccer team went there every single summer. And I loved the team atmosphere. I loved how close they were. They had a foreign influence. I thought that was really cool. I loved Dave Lombardo, the head coach at the time. And I look back at my own childhood with my father coaching me and how important that was. And my 8 best friends from high school or childhood, 8 best friends from childhood, we all played high school soccer together. And we're still, I mean, I'm having a Christmas party, we're 50, they're coming over. My 8 best friends, that were on my soccer team in high school on Friday. So it's under 10, we'll be socially protect, do all the right things. But that's what teams mean to me. It's like sticking together, being a family,
Mm-hmm.
When I go back to Dave Lombardo, still one of my closest friends, Mike Levine, one of my closest friends. So, and you hope that you can give people that experience. Like I just wanted to give young women, I just was hoping I could create that so they'd have that experience the rest of their lives.
Well, let's move on. Sorry, I was on mute. Let's move on to the books. I mean, these are great books. I absolutely love them. You, in 2018, you tell me how you guys started. It was with you and another soccer mom, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. So Mia Wengen is the co-author of the book. And really the whole reason, I didn't think I could write a book or I didn't think I should write a book, but so she was the mom of Sydney's. This is back when Sid was, we first met them when Sid was like 4 or 5 years old. We moved into the neighborhood. So they were best friends. She had 2 girls, 1 year older and 2 years older than my daughter. And they just hit it off and became best friends. And they played all different sports. And whenever there was a sports situation or, one of Mia's kids got cut or there was a, carpool issue, one girl was being left out of the carpool, whatever the case might've been, she'd come down. She's like, I've got this drama going on. Like this is going on in Allie's team, or this is going on in Zoe's volleyball team. And so I was like, oh, maybe, think about this and try to, and I would give a suggestion. And then 4 or 5 years after that, she was like, you got to write a book. Like you can help so many people, parents and coaches. Like you got to take this knowledge and like put it in a book. And I'm like, okay, I'm not writing a book. And then it was a great experience. She convinced me finally to do it. And, and I remember the stat of how many, of how many children, boys and girls, were stopping playing organized sport in middle school. And I just was like, if there is something that I can do to kind of keep them involved, let's do it, because that's not, again, thinking about everything great outside of just exercise, sport, provided me in my childhood. So we met for 2-3 months. Every Thursday morning we had coffee. She'd ask questions, we record, and that's sort of how the book developed. So, but yeah, it was really fun doing that. It was a lot of fun.
How do you balance when you're writing something like that too? Not trying to homogenize an entire group, or entire, gender, right, of people, and saying like, this is the way to coach, girls or women in soccer or sports in general.
Right. We tried throughout the book, and I have coached boys, but not to the extent, because my daughter was like, I don't think you should write that book. You haven't coached boys enough. That's what she told me. And a little bit true. I have coached boys, but I've been around boy athletes and boys teams so much in college and high school and everything. So, we try not to say every girl needs to be motivated this way. It was more in my experiences. Girls, like to be complimented occasionally, and they're gonna work harder for you. Now, there are girls out there that you can scream at, and that's gonna motivate them. So I tried to, use some verbiage in my experiences. The majority of girls are social, and they want the first, 5 minutes of practice when they come out of the high school or out of their classes or in college as well. They want to socialize. So I just let them go jog around the field, and talk and get that 5 minutes out. Now, some girls don't want to socialize. They're like, let's go. And they'd stay next to me. And like, I just give them reps with the ball. And like, because that's what they wanted to do. So we did try, Brian, not to say this is the end all be all and all women tick this way, all girls tick this way. So we were careful in our, in our language, or Mia was, because Mia was much better with the language, to not put everybody in one basket.
Yeah. And it too, and right, as a college professor, I don't discount individual experiences, personal observations. I do find it interesting, and this is super nerdy now of me, but how you can use careful wording and language to hedge, or modify your claims and your stance towards things. So it's just something that we really overlook a lot, but it's refreshing to hear you say that, and then provide that advice to other people of how do I talk about this without saying this is for everybody in all cases, in all scenarios, and everybody's the same, because they're not too.
Right. Well, it's even like simple words. If you say, okay, all the big girls go in the back of the team photo. You say, hey, all the big guys go in the back. They're like, hey, I'm in the back.
Yeah. So, but the 5'3" guys just like,
exactly.
I don't know. Why do I have to be in
from
front?
Experience there, G?
No, I'm thinking of my middle child. He's a little guy, but you're right. Like same thing, like little boys, or like when you say that to a girl, like Charlie's out there, right? You lift them up, or you're careful about your language, and they feel better, and they're gonna want to be around you and participate in those things better.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing the difference a word, if you choose your words well, what a difference it will make.
Yep. And I think that's experience, and I said, again, I'm sure I didn't do the best of it all the time. At 26, I probably reacted a little bit more emotionally and didn't, take enough time to, settle down and think about things before I gave the messaging at halftime. And I think that is something over time. It's a skill. You learn to do a better job of communicating, for sure.
So when you were a younger coach then, and earlier on, were you more aggressive, quick, harsh, and then you've mellowed out then, or like talking about that? Yeah.
I never think that. I never thought that it was harsh. No, because it's just not sort of who I am. But I think I was probably I didn't take my time in choosing words at halftime, as well as I should have. I was still playing back then. So I would jump in, demonstrate. I'm like, no, it's got to be like this. So I would jump in and just try to do it better. Right. So instead of, as you get older coaching, you can't demonstrate. You have to be a better communicator. You have to be able to choose words and descriptive of technique, descriptive of, I could run fitness and beat everybody my first couple of years. Right. So I could say, let's get fit. Let's go. Let's go, So you just, things change, and communication, I think, was one of the things that changed for me over time, that I hope that I did a better job of with my experiences.
I think so many players that become coaches, they know the game from the player side, and they've had coaches, and so they they emulate some of the things that they've heard and that sort of thing. But there's one of the reasons we're doing this show is to really get at the root of the rest of coaching, knowing people and knowing what motivates them and knowing what our words are doing and how they're affecting people. And I think the book, How to Coach Girls, was so great for me, because I can't tell you how many male coaches would get the girls crying within the first 3 minutes of practice. And it's like, are you not picking up on this? That this is not how they want to be coached.
Yeah.
It is really surprising. And it's not that it's not a matter of just being, a hard ass, for, lack of a better word. There's other ways to do things. And I think as you become more experienced, you learn more about people, and you learn more about how to communicate with different types of players.
Yeah, absolutely.
One question I have about this book is the first book, before we go on, is the idea that we're losing so many kids. It may go into the other book too, but we're losing so many kids in middle school. And it's something that Dr. G and I talk about a lot on our show, is that the way that sport is being done and how we're losing these kids. And so I'm hoping you could kind of give me your perspective on how do we keep, I mean, just to narrow it down, girls in soccer past, middle school.
Yeah, I think that's a critical age. Middle school kids start having other choices. They get a little bit more freedom from their parents. They're able to hang out. They have a voice in their extracurricular activities around that age, and I just think the most critical influence are teachers and coaches at that age, outside of your parents. And if you can create environments that they look forward to coming to in middle school, well, they're going to keep that, they're going to shut out other distractions, and they're going to choose, and if you make them feel a part of something really important and that they're proud of and that they love to represent, and give some sort of like status, whether it's going into high school, sports is such a wonderful thing to gain, that with. And I think too many times kids start feeling like they're dragging themselves, to practice, and it's not fun anymore. And then their parents aren't, are gonna give them an opportunity to play soccer or not play soccer. So just really making them feel proud of what they're doing and being a part of this, and complimenting their hard work and their success, and giving them that positivity to, like, this is a really cool thing, and just want them, so they intrinsically want to just keep doing it. They want to play, they want to do it. So I think you have a lot of influence as a coach to make that, to create that environment of connectedness, and to really have them keep wanting to do it.
Yeah. Can you think of another way that you develop that? I'll call it like a sense of belonging. How else have you developed that with some of the younger girls?
Yeah, I think a big part of it for girls is doing other things with the team outside of practice and games. Mm-hmm. So somebody has a Friday night pizza party, and kids love that stuff. And then that becomes what they do for their social life too. They're going to hang out and, or a pregame pasta party, or, you can teach so many great skills. You can do Toys for Tots with your team, and so many important, community services, to make them feel like this is something, I want this connection to stay. So certainly being positive and everything on the field is important, but creating it and having that group of players show their friendship in other ways, and show their, good intention in other ways, I think is really important to keep them together, because they want to do that. They want to, every it's like the wisdom of crowds. We all want to be included. We all want to have a connection at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm thinking, you got me thinking, and
Have you read that book, Wisdom of Crowds?
I don't know if I have. I end up, this is so bad, right? Like, you're going to expose me now. Like, I end up going back and reading more like original research than anything.
That's fantastic.
So I go back, instead of like people talking. Yeah, they talk about the books, and I'll be like, wait a minute, I read that article about that book like 4 years ago.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And then the book gets popular, and I'm like, oh yeah, I nerded out on the article. But what sounds like, right, like social, well, you talked about really academically, social cohesion, right? When you're forming a team, you do things on the field, but outside the field that are non-task related. We call them social cohesion or social activities. And sports psychology, that's a kind of fundamental of sports psych. But the sense of belonging too, that if young people especially, don't have that sense of belonging, and they start gravitating towards gangs or, crowds and groups that are doing what they call, right, antisocial behavior, then next thing you know, right, that's why we want people involved in sport if it's desirable and positive, but that's not a guarantee. But we don't want people in, right, drugs, gangs, violent, deviant, so-called deviant behavior, and things that are really going to be bad for your kids, and you don't want people doing those things.
Right. Correct. Yeah. Exactly.
All right, I'm done nerding out. I'm sorry.
I doubt it.
Cohesion is the word I should have used. Thank you, Doctor. That was good.
I'm sure that these very important articles are linked below, so
Thank
everyone
you. Yes.
can nerd out as well. So we do have the link for the elusive full ride scholarship. But tell us why should we run out and get it? What's in it? Tell me what I'm going to be reading about. I've already read it, but
yeah. I think there's a lot of misconceptions on how the recruiting process happens. And if you're, doing a club sport, then you're definitely going to get recruited. I think the stat for Division I, Division II, Division III, NAIA, and JUCO, high school kids, only 7% of high school kids are going to go in one of those 5 divisions. 7% of kids that are playing high school sport. That's not a high number. And I guarantee you, the majority of parents think it's 93%, right?
Yeah. You're talking about somebody else's kid. My kid's going to get the scholarship, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So the book wasn't written to be a Debbie Downer. It was, and break hope. It was more to guide you to be hopefully in that 7%. Here are some things you should be thinking about, whether it's, the exposure side of things, whether it was how to communicate with coaches, all the different facets of a prospective student athlete, and just, sort of an insider's guide and tips. I don't know too much, but since this is the only thing I've done my whole life, I know a little bit about this. It was designed to hopefully give them a better defined map on how to go through this recruiting process. And the good thing was, I had a lot of great people collaborating in that book. And, we had not only stories from coaches, Division III, people that won national championships, male coaches, female coaches, but we got male and female athletes to speak to about their process. And I find that more than anything I put in the book, what the players wrote about, and how they talked about their experiences, so helpful. So we just if that's something people want to do, we hope we can help families, navigate the process.
I got a great one for you, right? So you're head coach, BC, you've been in the field for 30 years then, and you're seeing now the development of, the elite youth sport athlete.
Yeah.
What's some of the craziest stuff you've seen from various recruiting clinics and firms and, gurus that are promising, all this stuff to the teenagers or even middle schoolers nowadays? Like, what's the stuff that you're like, wow, I can't believe that that's going on right now. And that's so, wrong and just inaccurate.
Yeah. I think a lot of recruiting companies actually give the wrong numbers, quite frankly. And I think, guarantees are, the word guarantee is a tough word, and probably shouldn't be used. And I think there's too many, websites or companies that say, like, we guarantee you to get to one of your top 5 schools. There's no guarantee, right? No. And, just that's when I think the biggest gimmicks is just using that word guarantee. Parents will go to great lengths to get their kids recruited. So, again, we try to defy some of those myths in the book, and, and steer people away from, certain things that maybe they just thought that they should do and probably shouldn't.
I will have to put in the show notes. I'll go find it, Meg, that NCAA does report, like those percentages every year or so, every 5 years they update it, whatever. But it's such a fraction. And they're just like, be involved in sports, but don't gamble everything you have on thinking your kid's going to get a scholarship. You got better odds of, your kid selling insurance or working at a retail store, or, you can invest your time and energy in some other things and have a balanced, child as well.
I agree with that. And I think, one of the things is the ROI effect comes in. Parents definitely think there's this, return of their, investment of club sport and all the tournaments we brought them and all the uniforms we bought and all the time and effort, that's a big part of it, time and effort. And so of course our kid, the light at the end of the tunnel, or the gold at the end of the rainbow is my child's going to get a scholarship because I'm putting in all, so you got to really, as a parent, take a step back. The return of investment is having your kid have an excellent experience on a team.
And I don't know, some fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's throw that in there.
We got to do more shows on it too, but I agree, but I also would hail the other parents. And there's actually research too that shows that parents do have higher expectations the more that they financially involve themselves, right? The more that they pay for sport. So they believe that, and it makes sense. But in today's age, the illusion or the attraction of, I can buy my way into an athletic scholarship because college is so expensive, or I want to try to get the leverage into the more elite school, that anything we can do on that regard is going to help. And it creates various forms of inequality. And it's also just inaccurate too, in how elite sports, Division I sports in particular, works.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really don't like how, I'll talk to Charlie's experience. The minute they started high school, all the girls talked about was, who are you looking at? Where are you going? What camp are you going to? It became, we talked about how BC was such a team and such a cohesive environment. Her teams became very competitive with each other at that point, and it was the only focus. So I'm hoping that at some point, someone is able to kind of break that circle of recruiting and getting them so early. I can't, when I was a freshman in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go.
I know. I do think one good thing, Meg, is the legislation that was put in by the NCAA now a year and a half ago, that in Division I, which was the division that was really expediting commitments and getting early commits. Now you cannot, for the majority of sports, not all, you cannot have any communication via email, phone, text, anything until June 15th prior to their junior year. So that's
just the athlete, right?
That's the athlete.
They talk to the coaches and they get.
It still can go around, but they can't talk to they used to be able to talk to the coach and, oh, can you have Charlie call me, at 8 o'clock. That can't happen anymore. So nothing can be instigated on the prospective student athlete side either. So it's zero on both sides until June 15th prior to their junior year. So and that was put into place, and I think that was a good legislation to slow this down, because it was getting out of control. People, and the transfer rates were going up, and the social pressure was going up, because in ninth grade, you go into the tournament because you want to get a letter to go to the ID clinic of the college coach in the sideline, as opposed to winning the game for your team and having fun. Yeah. So that legislation, I don't think we've seen the full effect. It'll take some time, but I have certainly seen improvement on just the psychological ease of the decision on families, and certainly the transfer rates will go down.
All right, so before we start wrapping stuff up, I want to give Alison a chance to give a little plug here. We're talking about the percentage of actual players that are able to go and be on a college team. But what about the Varsity Blues and scandal, and how crazy these parents are putting their heads, someone else's head on an athlete? And what are you doing with Foley Athletic Advising that's unique in this area so that this kind of stuff doesn't happen?
Yeah, for the most part, those are parents, right, promoting their children, if not everything. I think it was every case was a parent. So, so that's a big separation. And I think what we're trying to do with Foley Athletic Advising is advise the correct way, and show the correct way. And, some people do engage with our company as ninth graders, some their junior year, but the good thing is they all have different goals. And one thing is, I need to tell them, I don't think from a soccer perspective, that's a realistic goal. That's, your reach goal. And here's why, so it's really kind of helps the family be realistic and hopefully do it the right way. So I think that's, one of the just the years of experience that I have that we can kind of help and guide people that way.
I think it's important too. It's hard for parents to hear the real story, but the kids and the parents need to hear, reality. Here's what you really should be thinking, or here's what your options could be. So I think that's great that you're able to provide that.
And the thing is too, when people come in with this list, I'm like, guess what? There's some great schools out there. The NESCACs are wonderful. They're fantastic. And it might be a soccer level that you can impact too. So, so giving them, we just don't say no. We get to know them, and we through all these questions, and sort of like the soccer audience that we initially ask the prospective student athlete, about what they want their college experience to look like. And so we then can develop other schools that they're not thinking about that we think are better matches for them and redirect them there. So they thought, like, saying no to you, me saying, I don't think UNC is the right fit. And then, showing them other schools that they weren't considering at all that are great schools.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, we're at the point in the show when we ask you to dish. We want to find out, we try and get everyone to share with us either a good or bad coach story that is a little, has a lesson in there, something that either happened to you or, a teammate, or just a really good coach story.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a good story. I just remember, we talk a lot about communication and, and just how you find things out. I remember in the olden days in national camp, and this still happens sometimes when college coaches travel, they'll put the travel list on the back of in the locker room. And so then like that practice before, the bus, the flight, your flight, everyone's kind of tiptoeing in to see if their name's on that, that list or not. And, I found there were a lot of summers I found out I was cut off from the national team by a list in the dormitory, right? Not saying my name on the list in the dormitory. So I just think that is such a heavy, like, if I could ask coaches to just communicate bad news better.
Yeah.
As easy as that might sound, I think everyone's going to deliver the good news verbally, but coaches deliver bad news. That's when people need your support the most. So we used to, I did it before, by the way, I've done lists before. But over time, if somebody wasn't going to travel, I had that conversation with them individually, usually in the office or on the phone. And I've had it done to me both ways, and I've done it both ways. And I just think, a good lesson is, individually deliver your bad news.
So it sounds like the equivalent today's age of like cutting, you don't make this, you find out by tweet,
Right.
Don't text me up with me.
Yeah.
That warrants a phone call.
In 104 at Alison Foley, you have not made the team. Sorry.
Period.
Hashtag try again. You're like, oh my gosh, this is terrible.
Like next year. Yeah.
That is the perfect lead into my inspirational quote of the show.
Here we go.
Are you guys ready?
Ready.
Only dead fish go with the flow.
Here we go. Stay alive and active.
I think I finally made Dr. G speechless.
Stumped.
I think you just gonna compile all of these, and we're gonna put you in a skit with like other like real people and athletes, and you're gonna show up, and they're all just gonna look and go.
This is literally becoming my favorite part of the show.
Watch out. He can psychoanalyze you.
Oh yeah, whatever.
I tried. There was nothing there.
Oh, stop. All right. Well, thank you so much, Alison, for coming on the show. We appreciate your time, and I know everyone is going to really appreciate watching and listening to this, getting lots of great information. So thank you.
Hey, Sportlighters, thanks for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and get notified, because we have more sport knowledge coming your way. If you're interested in further information and want to engage in in-depth conversations about these and other issues in sport, please visit us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/sportlight. To stay updated on all things Sportlight, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Sportlight Media and Twitter at SportlightCom, no dot. Or feel free to email us at team@sportlight.com, and we will be happy to welcome you to the Sportlight community.